Today I am going to talk about PyraPOD with SolaRoof, which is an innovative ecosystem that is featured with 3'Ns, native and natural for nature. The script of this presentation is written by Aubrey Zhang, also called Bubbleman. He has a PhD in electrochemistry, now is the CEO of PyraPOD Global Inc. He is active in making sure that humanity learns from nature and works with nature. Here is a picture of Aubrey with his wife, Margaret, and 3 children, Riley, Grace, and Anita. Special thanks go to Richard Nelson, a native Canadian inventor of SolaRoof, an eco-friendly and super efficient technology that relies mainly on the sun to power everything. He passes his knowledge to Aubrey to make sure that Richard's inventions become a reality for this generation. Here is a picture of Richard with his wife, Geraldine. When we go outside, we see in nature that it is natively natural, stable, and gorgeous. Nature has taken a long time to perfect herself to be beautiful in every way. By the way, this is a picture of Croatia's national park, Plitvice Lakes. In contrast, robots, like these ones that can dance along with humans, are natively unnatural. It is okay for entertaining and service. But if we make them the spot of everyday's attention and foundation, we have missed the mark and the big picture. We see this from the recent fire of Los Angeles, when basic foundation, in this case, house, is burned out, everything else is gone with it. It is sad to see so many people and countries focus on the so-called the high techs, which are essentially based on low science. The true high science comes from those who have been uplifted above the pyramid top, who can see the big picture and perceive the critical, solid, and foundational things that most would not care to touch on. Nature is created and based on these fundamental principles that work all the time, in peacetime or during total disasters. Here is how nature works on the Earth. We have the sun up there to power the circulation of water. Water on the Earth's surface changes to its vapor state through evaporation. The water in the soil can also get into the atmosphere through a process called transpiration. The water vapor forms clouds in the sky and move around. The water in the clouds condense itself in the form of rain or snow. Then water returns its liquid state on the surface or soak into the ground. Lakes and rivers form this way, and the process goes on and on solely with the power of the sun. As a result, the Earth becomes a gigantic and living ecosystem on the move and in action, nourishing all living beings in the sky, on the Earth, and in water. As long as we know, the sun is so far the only source of energy for the Earth and the entire solar system. This is the energy that powers everything and puts everything in action. What is the medium the sun is using to do all the work? Yes, you get it right, water. Mainly nothing else but water. And we have water on 3 levels, as vapor in the sky, in the form of liquid, snow or ice on the Earth's surface, and as filtered fresh water in the ground. It is a common sense that water is the best thermal mass to contain the solar energy in the form we call heat. Let's get deeper into solar thermal energy, and the thermal mass of water. Here are 4 infrared imaging maps for a typical Chinese greenhouse. As you can see clearly that, on a clear day with the sun not being blocked by any cloud, the hottest spot is at the peak of the greenhouse, as the solar-heated air becomes lighter and rises to the top and stay there. After sunset on a clear night, we start to see solar heat loss. As a result, the warm zones get lowered and close to the ground. On the occasion of both cloudy day and cloudy night, the ground becomes the hottest zone. Why? Because the water in the ground gives it the highest capacity, as thermal battery, to store the heat that comes from the sun when we have the net solar gain. From these heat distribution maps, you can also see that the north wall plays minor role in storing solar heat. Why again? Because it contains less humidity than in the ground. As simple as that. This is why we bring water into our pod, a lot of water, to mimic the Earth in nature. By the way, PyraPOD literally means fire in pod. We proactively use the water to store the solar thermal energy during the day when we have the sun. Once the solar gain ends at night after sunset, heat loss takes over. Now 2 factors become critical. 1, what is the heat storage capacity of the thermal mass? And 2, how good is the insulation property of the greenhouse cover? We have already discussed the role of water as thermal mass. Now the question is, how to drastically boost the insulation property? Well, nature knows it too well. We need to pay attention. But before we learn how nature does it, we first look at how we humans do it and do it wrong with two extremes. One way to use solar vacuum tubes to heat up the water only in its liquid form. This is called water-based solar. Another way is done mainly in Japan and is called OM solar. By the way, OM means easy in Japanese. Well, it is truly easier to move the air than to move liquid water, but the air has a small capacity to contain and transfer heat. So we see this OM solar is essentially air-based solar. Both systems have their advantages and drawbacks because both push the use of solar thermal energy either to the left or to the right. Both work in the mentality of either or. Now it is time to see how nature does it and does it well. So let's watch this video.
If you spend any time outdoors, you've seen something like this on plants. Maybe you thought, gross, and walked away. But if you're 8 years old or a scientist interested in how insects breathe, you might have looked inside and seen a spittlebug. That's the nymph or young form of an insect called a froghopper. It's a relative of aphids and cicadas. But why the spittle? One idea was that it served as protection. Another was that it somehow helped the nymphs breathe, like bubbles of air that diving bugs use. It wasn't hard for the researchers to find the bugs to bring back to the laboratory or to watch how they make the foam. Here's how it works. A spittlebug sucks up watery sap from plants, and as it excretes urine, it forms the bubbles. The sap is not that nutritious, so the bug drinks a lot. Consequently, it excretes a lot of urine, about 150 to 280 times its body mass every day. That would be about 2,700 gallons for an average-sized human. The foam creates a kind of cocoon for the young insect to grow, as well as offering protection from birds, wasps, and spiders. It has kind of a bitter taste. But the question for scientists was, does the nymph breathe through those bubbles? No, not usually. The bug sticks the tip of its abdomen up out of the foam as a kind of snorkel. You can see it just breaking the surface. Measurements of carbon dioxide in the bug's environment and oxygen in the bubbles show that it is breathing while it's snorkeling. However, if it's threatened, it sinks down in the bubbles. It doesn't stay there long unless it has to. Then, it pops smaller bubbles to form a larger one that it can breathe through, like an emergency air supply. Then, once the coast is clear, the spittlebug can re-emerge. Eventually, the nymph forms one big bubble, hides inside it, and undergoes a transformation to its adult form. But without its bubble home, what does it do about predators? Well, it's a froghopper. It hops. Boy, does it hop.
So we just watched how nature does it and does it well and naturally. As the spittlebug breathes in air and drinks sap from plants, it adds protein in the mixture and increases the surface tension of water. So when the protein-contained mixture of water and air comes out, it is bubbling, and a lot of bubbles generated this way. We do the same in our PyraPOD as in nature. We use bubbles to combine both the water-based solar and air-based solar as one integrated system. We call it bubble solar. Then the synergy of the two is the greatest. Beside bringing massive amount of water into our PyraPOD, we use soap solution to blow bubbles, a lot of them, to fill the double layer cavity. This way, our pod is highly insulated by these bubbles. Compared to water in its liquid form, bubbles are the relatively dispersed form of water. So this makes them easier than before to take in as much solar thermal energy as possible. As a result, bubbles, combined with water thermal mass, make PyraPOD the smartest design and answer the two critical questions we asked earlier. So let us put PyraPOD in comparison with a conventional greenhouse. Here is a real temperature curve of a typical Chinese greenhouse, taken from the month of October to January of the following year. The blue curve shows the ups and downs of the external air temperature. The orange curve records the huge swings of temperature with the rise and set of the sun. While a conventional greenhouse does provide some sort of warming effect, it sort of creates a new problem. The greenhouse becomes too hot when we have the sun during the day and too cold at night. The temperature swing extent can be as high as 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. This is too much of a stress for living things inside. In the case of PyraPOD, since we store solar heat in water during the day and insulate it effectively at night, we would expect to see a level-out temperature as indicated by the red curve. Here is a real temperature curve for a Norwegian bubble greenhouse recorded in the year of 2013. The black curve registered the change of carbon dioxide concentration, the blue curve showed the air temperature inside the bubble greenhouse, and green line depicted the change of relative humidity. We see clearly the swing of indoor temperature along with the sun had drastically reduced within 10 degrees Celsius. After some sort of adjustment was done, the temperature swing was reduced further within 5 degrees. Note that this bubble greenhouse in Norway does a good job producing bubbles and filling the cavity with bubbles for insulation but does not proactively work with water thermal mass. For this reason, we can only say it is more like a passive house with bubble insulation. PyraPOD is a proactive way to work with both water thermal mass and bubbles at the same time. To increase the thermal mass further inside our PyraPOD, we have found that Mark McMurtry's innovative and original sandponics is a good companion to have in operation inside our pod. The fish tanks and the sand beds are both great thermal mass to be used as solar thermal batteries. This diagram was a result of Harvey Rayner working under the guidance of Richard Nelson, while Harvey was in UK, building his bubble greenhouse there. This shows the same circular water process as what we show in nature earlier with great benefits. As we mimic the atmosphere by adding an inner layer of glazing under the external cover to form a cavity, greater things happen there. Heat exchange between two thin films of water. One is the proactively controlled flow of soap liquid on the top side, and the other is the resulting flow of condensated clean water on the lower side. The latter process of getting water out of the thin air gives us sustainable supply of drinking water on daily basis. Here is a slide listing all the benefits you can get when you build a bubble greenhouse the correct way, the PyraPOD way. We show a design of the smallest PyraPOD with a footing of only 4 by 4 meters. The cost is low to build DIY and set it up. If the build is airtight, the water inside circulates without any loss, other than what is ended up in vegetables and fish. It saves 90% in running cost, especially when we do Mark's sandponics inside. It is natively an organic growing system. Snow melting in winter and liquid cooling in summer are built in. It can be easily automated and produces fresh distilled water daily, along with many other benefits that you can explore yourself. To move one step further, Richard and Aubrey have designed this PyraFLOT, which is literally a floating lot to build your flood-proof dream home. It can be directly placed in lake, or be buried in ground with gravels and sands. This way, when the flood truly comes, PyraFLOT can be uplifted from the ground and float around to avoid being damaged. Well, so long for this episode. Considering the fact we have witnessed a major wildfire in the city of LA, I would like to end this presentation with the third video clip,